Hi there, and welcome to Using the Whiteboard feature in Zoom for TAs at YorkU in 2020. So there's actually a lot of TA training out there right now for remote learning. However, most of it is trying to go over every possible Zoom feature at once, so they can't be very detail-oriented. So I thought, why not just make one video that only talks about the whiteboard? So why use the whiteboard at all? Well, it has lots of different functions and it's very easy to use. Once you know what all the buttons do, it's actually pretty intuitive and you can do a variety of things with it to change up your lesson plan or keep things visually interesting. Also, it's a great way to keep discussion organized. Don't worry that using the whiteboard feature is going to prevent discussion or make students feel like you're just there to give them a lecture. Having some written milestones can be a great way to orient the discussion because talking in Zoom can feel a little bit unnatural and it can be easy to get lost, especially if you have technical difficulties that throw off the discussion. And lastly, in my personal opinion, the best reason to use the whiteboard is that it's an excellent way to save work and post it for later. The perfect bridge from synchronous to asynchronous learning. If you're hosting a live tutorial and going over the content for the week, by using the whiteboard to write down sort of the milestones of what you've written, maybe have some collaborative discussion with students, all you then need to do is save your whiteboards and post them. You can either post them to your e-class in a PDF, you can put them together in an e-class announcement and send it out, or you can just email it to students. Or you don't even have to post it, you can just save them and you have a great study guide to send out when exam time comes along. In my personal opinion, the whiteboard is a great way to record your tutorial without having to use the Zoom record feature. Some students might be a little uncomfortable with the idea that the entire tutorial is being filmed, recorded, and posted. You might be uncomfortable with that idea too. So the whiteboard, in my opinion, is the best way to record things without recording absolutely everything. So let's get started. So before we start using the whiteboard in a Zoom meeting, what we're going to want to do is make sure that we have all the whiteboard features that we want enabled in our Zoom account. So what you're going to want to do is go to yorku.zoom.us. You'll be taken to a home page where you'll be prompted to sign in. Once you sign in, which means entering your Passport York credentials, you'll be brought to this profile page. Once you're at the landing page, which will have your name, your account information, and other things that I don't want to show you, you have to scroll down on the left to Settings. Once we're at Settings, there's still a lot of settings and we're not worried about most of them. So just go right over here to In-Meeting Basic. Once we're at Basic, we just need to scroll down a little bit. And here we have the whiteboard settings. Now, the whiteboard should be automatically enabled, so you don't have to worry about turning it on or off. But what we're interested in are these save features. So if you want to save your whiteboard slides and post them later, you're going to want to tick these boxes to allow the saving of whiteboard content and allow them to save automatically. That way, you don't have to think about it. Once a Zoom meeting is over, you'll get a pop-up bubble that shows all the whiteboard slides, and then you can do what you want with those files. And I'll show you that at the end of this video. Here you can see that there are two different file types that you can select. You can either save your whiteboard slides as a PDF or as a PNG. I like a PNG because that's an image file. Those files are really easy to pick up and drop into other types of files like PowerPoints or Word documents. That's entirely up to you, but that's my preference. So just to reiterate, that's yorku.zoom.us, log in using your Passport York credentials, go into Settings, down to In-Meeting Basic, and then do whatever you like with the whiteboard. So now that you have the pre-steps down, let's look at the whiteboard in a Zoom meeting. So I've queued up a Zoom meeting here, and I'm muted, as you can see. So what I'm going to do is I can show you how to use the whiteboard. But before we do that, I'm actually going to invite myself on a separate account to this meeting. If you want to test out the whiteboard features in Zoom all by yourself, that's fine. That'll work really well. But just to show you a little bit of how interaction can go on the whiteboard, I would like another participant, so I'm going to invite myself on the account on my iPhone. All right, so there's me and me. So now that I have somebody in here, I'm going to show you the whiteboard. So, as you've probably already seen in some of the Zoom meetings you've already attended, here at the bottom you have your dashboard. It has all of the options that you want for a Zoom meeting, but what we're concerned with today is the screen share. So just click on that, and then the whiteboard is always going to be your second option. So click on the whiteboard, and we're going to click share, and here we go. Now you have the whiteboard. Now, as the host, right now, you can see everything on my desktop, but the students can't. The only thing that the student is going to see on their end is within this white rectangle. So don't worry about things that are in the background. The whiteboard is the only thing that they're actually able to see. So right here up at the top are all the whiteboard tools that we have available to us. There is a select tool, a tool to create a text box, a drawing tool, stamp, spotlight, eraser, formatting for other tools, undo, redo, clear, which clears the entire page, and of course, save, if you'd like to save things as you go. So let's get started with the tool you'll probably use most often, the text tool. So if we go into formatting, we can actually choose the color of text that we want to use. We can select bold, italicize, and the font size. And you have a fair range here. I find that 12 is pretty tiny. It's not super workable. Usually 18 and 24 are great to get started. And this works just like any other keyboard function. You can just type whatever you like. And of course, you can create as many text boxes as you want. You can write anything, wherever you'd like. This is pretty intuitive. The only thing I'd like to point out is that let's say you want to go and fix something that you've already typed, or maybe you want to add to it. If I still have the text tool enabled and I try to click on words I've already written, all it's going to want to do is give me new text boxes, and that's not what I want. So what you have to do is make sure that you've enabled the select tool. Once select is enabled, just double click on the box you want to edit, and now you're back in. You can do whatever you like. Add a little more nonsense. Also, once you have the select tool enabled, if you click on the sides of this text box, you can move it around. Maybe you want to change the order of things or give yourself a little more room. You can move things around as you like. The other tool that you're probably going to use most often is the draw tool. Again, we have lots of different things that we can do, like drawing arrows, boxes, or lines. And again, the formatting tool allows us to change what kind of lines we want. So I can change the width and the color. Let's do some lavender. So there, we have a nice thick line, very easy to see. Or we can do a very thin line that doesn't take up very much space. And you can draw anything that you like on your whiteboard. Maybe you need some shapes. Maybe you want to circle something. There's lots that you can do. Moving on, if you want some pre-made shapes, the stamp tool has a few different options. So you have arrows, check marks, X's, question marks are great. Now, when you're using the whiteboard on your own, the stamps might not be super useful, but where they do come in handy is allowing students to annotate the whiteboard themselves. So I'm not able to show you this because I'm the host, but when your students are in your meetings and want to use the whiteboard, up at the top, there'll be a button that allows them to annotate. So you can invite your students to turn annotations on, and then they can contribute to your whiteboard. So if you watch here on my host account, my cursor is going to stay up here in the top right-hand corner. But now on my phone, where I've accessed the meeting through the Zoom app, I can do a little drawing down here and make some very poorly drawn hearts. So if you have students, even if they're not using a desktop or laptop computer, but are using the Zoom app on a mobile device like an iPhone or tablet, they can still participate in the whiteboard and still annotate things. This can be great if you have things written on your whiteboard and you want to ask students, is there something you'd like to emphasize, or do you want to make a mind map? The other nice thing about allowing students to annotate is that they only have so much control over what they can do. So, for example, right now I've enabled the eraser tool on my iPhone, and I'm trying very hard to get rid of that purple square. But I can't do it because in my student account, I didn't make that, so I can't delete other people's work. However, I can get rid of my own. So if I've made a mistake, I can get rid of it. I can break these hearts. The other nice thing is that as the host, if I use my eraser, I can get rid of student work. So if the exercise is over, or if students have written things that are maybe in your way or aren't correct, you can just erase them. So if you feel like your students are sort of confident and willing enough to use the whiteboard, you can absolutely do that and have some collaborative learning going on. The last few buttons here, the undo and redo, are sort of as you would expect. And again, that only applies to things that I have done. Students can't be using these buttons to get rid of your work. I can clear the whole thing and I can save. Now, you don't need to use the clear button if you just want more space. So let's say we still have some more notes to do, but we've taken up a lot of room here. That's fine. Just go down to the bottom right-hand corner and add yourself a new page. You can add as many as you'd like. So don't worry about running out of space. You can always add more. You don't have to delete anything if you don't want to. I can add some more things in here. Now, you've probably already noticed that the whiteboard is great, but I can't see anything else. I can't see the other participants in my meeting, I can't see the chat, and I can't see anyone else's video. Well, there are a few things we can do about that. So on my phone, I'm going to turn my camera on. And now all of a sudden, there's my ceiling and my videos have popped up. If everyone has their videos off, this bubble isn't going to appear because there's no reason for it. But if people have their cameras on, you'll still be able to see them over here on the side. And there will be, I think, a maximum of about 4 or 5 of these, and you can scroll through and look at people. Personally, I find this a little bit distracting, so if you don't want to be able to see or don't need those videos, just hit the hide thumbnail and get this out of the way. It'll still show you who's talking, but you don't need to look at all those tiles. The other things that you might want to be able to see are the participant window and the chat. So let's start by talking about the participant window. As you probably noticed in other Zoom meetings, students have all sorts of ways to get your attention. They can use the raise hand, there's a yes, there's a no, go forward, go faster, thumbs up, thumbs down, stuff like that. So right now on my phone, I'm hitting a bunch of those buttons. I'm trying to say yes, no, clap, thumbs up, thumbs down, but I can't see any of that because as the host, I'm using the whiteboard. However, if a student selects the raise hand button, keep your eye up here on the right, I will get a notification. So if a student needs your attention while you're using the whiteboard, as long as they hit raise hand, you'll get a notification and you can then acknowledge that student and ask them what's up. What you can also do is just select participants and you get a window. And you can move this around to wherever you'd like. So now, if you pay attention to Hannah Maitland II, the student, now you can see that I've said yes, no, go slower, go faster. Now I'm able to see these more passive forms of engagement if I want to maybe poll the class or ask them, did that make sense? Do you want me to go slower, go faster, etc. You're able to see that now. The other thing that you might want to be able to see is the chat feature. So again, on my phone, I've opened up the chat and I'm going to send the host a message. If a student sends a message, you will get a notification like this. Just a little one or however many messages you have. It's not going to show you the message right away. If you use the chat a lot, and that's a key way for you to engage with your students, or that's just how they like to communicate with you, maybe if they don't have an available microphone, you might want to also have this up and available so you can see a scrolling chat. So now I can see that my student self is clearly very confused. So using the chat can be really useful if you're doing something like building a mind map. So let's say I ask a question of, what are some examples of things that are globalized? Students will then be able to contribute very quickly in the chat without speaking over each other. The chat can be really great while using the whiteboard because you can see and communicate with students, but they might be a little bit too shy or polite to just interject with their microphones. So my globalization question, what's globalized? We can say food is, media, religion maybe, sport, I guess. And now I can see all that. It's come up on my screen. Now, of course, while that's really useful to be able to stay engaged with your students, we've now taken up a fair bit of room. So you might prefer to say, hey, just get on your microphone and talk if you need my attention. You can't see much when you have the whiteboard going, but you can hear everything. As long as someone turns their microphone on, you'll be able to listen in. Now, of course, I've run out of room, so I might want to move the whiteboard over like this. This is fine, but whatever you've written on the whiteboard, students can only see what you can see. So let's say I have some information down here. If I move my whiteboard, now I can't see those hearts, and the students can't see them either. They can only see what I have available. So if you're moving the whiteboard around in order to write things, or keep an eye on things like your chat or your participation window, that's fine. Just make sure that you're moving it back so students can see the full picture again. So let's say we're done with our whiteboard. We have 2 pages, we've had a whole Zoom meeting. It's time to say goodbye. So I can get rid of these things. I can either go up to this bar here and say stop my screen share, or I can just close my whiteboard. I'm going to say stop share, then there's my hand. And now that's going to be it for my meeting. Tutorial's over, let's end this. So now, because I've enabled to save the whiteboards automatically, they've come up in this box once the meeting is over. So now, I have a record of exactly what we were working on. These have already been automatically downloaded to my computer, so you can either close this and just search them up later, or right away you can drop these into a Word document, do whatever you like with them. And that's really all that I have to say for the whiteboard features within Zoom itself. So now that you've seen the whiteboard in action, let's review what we talked about today. So the pros. The whiteboard is a very versatile tool and it's collaborative. You can run the whiteboard all by yourself, but you can also invite students to add things as well. Also, a great benefit for the Zoom whiteboard is that it's compatible with digital drawing tablets. And a drawing tablet is the item that I have pictured here. So a tablet is a piece of hardware that you can install to your computer, and then, like you can probably see in the image, you can use it like a pen. So you can draw on the whiteboard with a pen, which might be a little bit more intuitive, especially if you're someone who really likes drawing diagrams or mind maps. Now, a lot of tablets are made for professional artists, so they're very expensive. But if you go to a retailer like Best Buy, you can find a perfectly serviceable drawing tablet for less than $100. The other nice thing about a drawing tablet is that right now, CUPE has a fund for anyone teaching remotely, where you can purchase hardware and software and be reimbursed. So if you think that a drawing tablet will help you use a whiteboard or do anything else while you're teaching remotely, you can get one for a decent price and it can be reimbursed by CUPE, which is great. Also, another positive thing about the whiteboard is that it's available to both desktop and Zoom app users. So a lot of students at York don't have personal computers or don't have access to personal computers full time. So they're reliant on a mobile device like a tablet or more often a cell phone. So if students are logged into Zoom on an app, they can still see and collaborate with a whiteboard, which is awesome for including all of your students. Now, of course, as much as I'm clearly in love with the whiteboard feature, there are a few key drawbacks to keep in mind. The first is that the whiteboard is a purely visual tool. If for whatever reason you find yourself in a tutorial where the students are all, or at least the majority, are calling in as audio participants and they're unable to see, then the whiteboard isn't going to be very useful for you because it's a great visual medium, but you can't hear it. The other potential drawback with Zoom is that it cannot support image files. So if you have a picture saved as a PNG or a JPEG or a TIFF file, you can't just drop it into the whiteboard. It doesn't like that, it won't support it. So if you really need to show your students an image, that's going to have to be a separate screen share. Similarly, you have limited copy and paste abilities in the whiteboard. So if you open up a Word document, copy the text, you can paste it into the whiteboard and then do what you want with it. However, a lot of formatting that you get in other word processors is not going to translate into the Zoom whiteboard. So for example, if you've copied some text that has bold, some italicized words, maybe some highlighting, some special characters, a lot of that just isn't going to make it into the paste into the whiteboard. So if you just have a long but basic definition that you want to work with, that'll be an easy copy and paste. However, if you want to share something like a pronunciation guide with students that has certain special characters, that probably isn't going to work out especially well. So what you're going to need to do, unfortunately, is a separate screen share. So just keep those in mind while you're using the whiteboard to make sure that it can do what you would like it to do. But also, a lot of your students will be familiar with the whiteboard already, they will have already been in classes that use it, and some will be new users. Everyone's sort of learning the technology. Remote learning is new to the vast majority of us. So if you want to set aside some time in your tutorial just to play with the whiteboard and learn it with your students, that can also be a great ice-breaking activity, and you can learn the functionality together as a class. So that's it for me. That's my sort of personal introduction to the whiteboard and what it can do. I hope that this was helpful. Yeah, remote teaching. It sure is something. Enjoy the whiteboard, and thanks. Bye.